Hello everyone, this is Mr. Vanderpool. We're going to continue talking about Congress here. We're going to talk about how a bill becomes a law and the legislative process. So, the role of the Congress is to create legislation, to make laws, but before you have a law, you have a proposed law, which is called a bill, and we're going to be talking about how a bill becomes a law. So the founders believed in a slow process. The founders believed efficiency was a trait of an oppressive government. Basically, you could say that they believed an efficient government was also efficient at tyranny. So the system of checks and balances that exists in the legislative process reduces efficiency. And political philosophers will argue if that's a good thing or not. So let's look at that process. So step one is to introduce the bill. So a bill is going to be introduced in either the House or the Senate, except for tax bills. Revenue bills must be introduced in the House. A single or multiple representatives can introduce bills. So after a bill is introduced, it goes to committee. A bill is assigned to a particular committee in its category. So a tax bill is going to be assigned to Ways and Means. A farm bill is going to be assigned to the Agricultural Committee, for example. Within these committees, there are subcommittees, so the bill is placed in the subcommittee. Here, bills are debated, they're marked up, they're changed. And most bills are going to die in committee. That's important to remember. But committees can vote to report out a bill. So it can be debated and voted on by the entire House or Senate. Now, I want to focus in on the House and a special type of committee that only they have, which is the Rules Committee. Very, very important committee in the House. It decides how and when bills are going to be debated. It's the traffic cop of the House. So before a bill can go to the floor of the House, it must first set time limits and amendment regulations. So there's various types of amendment regulations. You have a closed rule, which sets strict time limits, restricts the number of amendments onto a bill. You have an open rule, which permits various amendments, and a restrictive rule, which permits some amendments. So these rules establish the rules for debate in the full House. It's important to note that in the Senate, there is no Rules Committee. So the next step, after you get out of committee in the House and the Senate, if a bill makes it out of there, is going to be floor debate. So Senate debate is going to be less formal, no speaking limit. A practice that exists in the Senate is the filibuster. This is the practice of talking a bill to death, the practice of stalling a bill with a debate. So basically what ends up happening is senators or multiple senators will talk about a bill, so you can't vote on it. Now, there is a way to end a filibuster. It is called cloture. 3/5 of the Senate has to vote to stop debate. So because filibuster exists in the Senate, in reality it takes 60 votes to pass anything in the Senate. If not, the bill will generally be filibustered if you do not have those 60 votes. House debate is more formal, there's no filibuster, and there's more strict rules since you have more people debating. It's also important to note that if a committee doesn't report out a bill, the House or the Senate can draw a bill out of committee with what's called a discharge petition. So step 5 is voting. Generally, a majority is going to pass the bill. If the bill passes, it must go through the same process in the opposite chamber with a sponsor. So a bill needs to pass the House and the Senate in order to make it on a president's desk. If the vote passes one house, fails the other, starts over. If the Senate and the House cannot come to agreement over 2 versions, it goes to what's called a conference committee to fix and to resubmit a bill. So there has to be one bill that's agreed upon and passed in the House and the Senate that is going to be sent to the president's desk. And next you'll have presidential action. So the president can sign the bill into law. The president can veto the bill and return it to the chamber of origin. They can, this veto can be overridden with a 2/3 vote in both houses. And then there's something that's called the pocket veto. So the president has 10 days to act on a piece of legislation. If he receives the bill within 10 days of the end of the congressional session and he doesn't sign, the bill will then die. That is what is called a pocket veto. It's also important to note that if a president receives a bill and Congress is in session, the bill will become law if the president doesn't do anything about it. So if the president receives a piece of legislation and the congressional session ends, it's going to die, but if the congressional session is continuing, it will automatically become law. All right, so let's remember that overriding, 2/3 vote in both chambers to override a veto. All right, let's talk a little about congressional committees and subcommittees. This is where the real work happens. Bills are passed, changed, ignored, or killed in committee. Now, there are various types of committees. Standing committees handle bills in different policy areas. So you have appropriations, agriculture, armed services. These are really the most important committees. They've been standing, they've been existing for a long time. You also have select committees. These are formed for specific purposes and are usually temporary and are meant to run investigations. So there's a variety of topics in select committees. You have joint committees. These consist of both House and Senate members, similar to, in purpose to a select committee generally, and they're meant to draw attention to issues, generally common issues. Then you have conference committee, which we've already talked about. This consists of House representatives as well as senators. They're formed to hammer out differences between House and Senate versions of a bill, so that bill can get sent to the President of the United States to be signed or vetoed. All right, committee membership. So it's important to note, committees are controlled by the majority party, the party that controls Congress. Committee membership is divided proportionally. So if let's say the Republicans control the House, you're going to have a majority of most of the committees are going to be Republican. The committee chairman is generally going to be a member of the majority party, and they are the most powerful person on that committee. Oftentimes, they're the senior member of the committee. They control membership as well as debate. And we'll be watching some interesting committee hearings a little later on in class. So, what do committees do? Lots of bills are introduced yearly. Most of them die in committee. Committees can report out favorably, unfavorably. They can pigeonhole. They can table an amendment. This basically means not discussing it. They can amend. They can mark up. They can change or rewrite a bill as well. Caucuses are important. These are groups of members pushing for similar interests. So here's some examples. The Women's Democratic Study Group, for example, is a liberal caucus. Steel Caucus promotes the steel industry, etc. So what are some criticisms of Congress? One criticism is that they put out too much pork. This is also known as pork barrel legislation. So that basically is bills that are meant to benefit constituents in hopes of gaining their votes. Another criticism is log rolling. Congress members exchange votes. Bills might pass for frivolous reasons. So it's kind of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of reasoning. You also have Christmas tree bills, and these are bills with many riders. Lots of pork. So in the Senate, no limit exists on amendments, so senators attach riders that will benefit their home state in order to get votes. You can have a ton of different topics in one bill with this Christmas tree bill. All right. Term limits are a very hotly debated topic in Congress. So no current limit exists on how many terms members of Congress can serve. Some argue this has weakened popular control of Congress. Representatives might be unresponsive to their constituents because they don't have a real threat to not be reelected because they are incumbents, and incumbents usually win due to name recognition, franking privileges, and such. So if members of Congress aren't worried about being reelected because of their advantage of incumbency, the argument is that they are going to be unresponsive to their constituents. Some argue that most experienced reps have the expertise to bring home more benefits. So they would be against term limits. They like experienced representatives. Others will also say that they don't have to rely on lobbyists and bureaucrats as much because they have more experience in government. So they're a little bit more independent. So number one would generally be an argument used for people that are in favor of term limits. And number two would be an argument that would be used for somebody that is against term limits. All right, then we have the assessment here. So we're going to describe the leaders of the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. We're going to describe the process by which a bill becomes a law. Probably have to pause, so we'll move on. We're going to describe what we've learned today. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.